I'm Walter Tamu Wiles, Senior. I'm currently in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Son of Richard Jones Wiles and Daisy Pye Wiles. My grandfather was Richard Stanley Wiles, who was a trader and eventually in his line became Speaker of the House of Representatives in Liberia. His wife was May Florence May Wiles. I think she was a Grimes. And these were all part of that puzzle of the group that linked to Barbados. My great-grandfather, I really do not have a handle on their names, because my understanding was that two Wiles brothers came from Barbados, came to Liberia. They settled more in the Cape Mount area. And Grandpa used to do a lot of trading with the ships through Piassava and all of these things that he had a lot of boats that they were, he would buy things from up in the Cape Mount area, and with his boats going through the Piso, the opening in the Piso, he would take things to the boat and sell. I knew, or I met this old man who used to ride bicycle with him from Cape Mount to Monrovia through Royceville. And when that story came to me, old man Kundukai from Vonzon, because I think his mother came from Vonzon, and they used to ride bicycle from Cape Mount to Monrovia through Royceville. I think that's how my Uncle Ripe's mother was out of Royceville. So I met with this old man. He was so old. I didn't have the time to spend more time with him because then I was in Swakoko, but I did my best to take care of him in his old age, providing him medicines and food and all of that in Vonzon before he passed. Now, we were born, I was born on Newport Street when my grandfather gave the house he had on Newport Street to my father and his brother, Uncle Stanley. Stanley Waldron Wiles, I think that was his full name. I don't know if you've had any member of that family on your documentary, like LMA. But they lived there until Uncle Stanley built his house, and they moved to Capitol Hill. Uncle Stanley was married to Dewar, and they moved out there, and I think the kids were James, Eileen, Wiles, and then I think Ella May came in way late, but she's currently in the States somewhere. But my parents, Richard Jones and Daisy Pye, had four kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. Mamusu Flores Wiles Tons, married to the late Melvin Tons. Myself, Chantal Dewar Doe, married to the late Lawrence Doe. And my brother, Arthur Janakai, is currently in New Hampshire. So they had 4 children, but my dad was married before and had a son, Richard Alexander, and he's currently in Monrovia. So he was the first. And then after they divorced, my father married my mother. Now she was a nurse, a graduate from TNIMA, and she worked with public health, and she became an outreach nurse with an interest in both Western and traditional medicine. Daddy worked for Citibank as a banker, an accountant. And one of the big things, most that he did was open Citibanks outside of Monrovia. So wherever you had Citibank branch opening, that was his responsibility. I know half of the time we will see him late at night because, like he would say, I had to make sure I check all the money from the tellers. Everybody money was balanced before I was able to come home. So most of the time it was my mother who was at home, but she comes from working, and then Daddy would come home later in the evening. Growing up on Newport Street was very interesting. Newport Street, and we used to call it Copper Farm. I don't know if you remember that name. Why they call it Copper Farm, I don't know. But he told me as when they lived in that area, number one, we had the best well. So everybody came to our house to draw water, drinking water. But he also told me that they used to hunt deer in that area. So up on the hill in Mama Point, it was still forest, and they still have wildlife where they used to go up there. Growing up in Copper Farm, as a little devilish young man, I was always in some fight, either for things people were just passing on the street, or, right behind our house was a crew town where I used to just fight with the crew boys, and my neighbors were the boys from the Bassa boys. And so we had our own group, and we used to fight with the crew group for just used tires that we were using as our toy on the street, used tires from the cars or from the bicycles. So we're always engaging in fights, but it was fun as kids. And then, boys, when you fight, you become friends, and so it was so nice and interesting. And so we're either fighting somebody who was new at the well or new in the area, and that's how we went. My mother, being a nurse and coming from Cape Mount, her father and mother were James Moore, and I think the mother's name was Florence, but her parents got drowned in the Piso at an early age. So she lived with Ms. Patient Williams, commonly called Mapi, from Cape Mount, and that's where she grew up. But everywhere she went, whenever she went to Cape Mount or she went to a village, she brought somebody. If she met a kid who was smart and asked her all the questions that she thought that kid needed to go to school, she would bring that person in the house. So we had a house full of people from everywhere. Every village my mother went to, she brought somebody. All my cousins that she thought needed to go to school, she brought them home. And so we had that. But nevertheless, our tasks and chores in the house was divided among everybody. We had to make sure every Saturday we scrub the floor with coconut hull and ashes. We all did a lot of chores growing up, scrubbing the floor, cleaning the house. The only thing we didn't do as boys, we didn't go in the kitchen to cook, which I think was a shortcoming. I wish we had learned how to do all those different country dishes. But growing up, our grandparents lived on Broad Street, where the Relda Rivoli, across from the Ministry of Finance. Once you came from school, we all had to go there and eat lunch and all that stuff before coming home. And that was one of the things that got to me, was that they always had gravy and rice. And now I used to tell my wife, I can eat anything, but I don't want no gravy and rice. If you give me gravy and check rice and gravy, I will eat it. Gravy and Split peas, I'll eat it, but just gravy and rice, no way. But that was just part of the growing up process. But also, you know, life on Newport Street was beautiful. There were a lot of friends I had. And with the parents going to work, you know, peer pressure and things that we did on the street, I think it got to my parents to where they decided that they needed for me to go outside of the country to get better education and training. Because one of the things I always remember and tell people was that I went to school late, B.W. Harris, and Father Johnson suspended me for a week. But I never told my mother I was suspended. So I used to go to school every day and go to Coconut Plantation to play ball and swim. And I think that was the one that made that, you know, the straw that broke the camel's back, and they decided to send me to Sierra Leone to school. My parents had a friend from Sierra Leone, a paramount chief who had come to Liberia for agriculture extension training. And that's who they decided to take me to stay with him, to go to school and get some proper training and discipline. So at 18, I went and took the plane from Spriggs, flew to Bumble on the border in Cape Mount, and crossed the Mano River in the canoe, and went on to Sierra Leone, where I went to 1 year of elementary, and then I went to secondary, high school. I went to Bow School, which was a school for sons of chiefs. And so although I was taking from Newport Street, but I think I became privileged. I mean, it was fun because it was school for all boys, built by the British for the sons of the paramount chiefs. And I had fun. I learned a lot. So I was in Sierra Leone for 6.5 years before coming back to Liberia. Actually, I was coming for vacation because I was going to go to Frappe College or university. But my mother said I had been away too long, and so I needed to stay home. So that's how I ended up going to the university in 1971. But in all of that discussion, I think I remember my father talking about the, I think 55 situation in political situation where they were not full-fledged true Whig Party member or who they were supporting, and they were all in the hills in Newport Street with guns, opposing the government issues that they were bringing up. But I didn't get much into that because I wasn't too interested in politics. My mother being a nurse, so I learned how to drive early. I used to take her to the hospital, pick her up in the evening after work. And then I developed that interest in medicine and agriculture because we had a farm where Hotel Africa is now. We had 45 acres of land there. We used to grow sugarcane and make rum to sell. In Todi, they had about 200 acres of land where they grew citrus. And so we'll go to Todi, pick up the oranges, tangerine, grapefruit, bring it to the market, and then go to make sure that the cane was ready for distilling to make cane juice. Until that piece of land was taken by government to build Hotel Africa. And the land in Todi, I think one of the representatives decided to sell it piece by piece until the war broke out. But actually, my interest was in becoming a medical doctor, a neurologist. So when I came back from Sierra Leone in 1970, I think the late FLAMMA SHERMAN was Minister of Education. So my mother took me to him, and I gave him all my papers. But at registration for the medical school at LU, he couldn't find my papers. So I had to go to Sierra Leone again to get a second copy. And by the time I got back, the medical school registration had closed. And the next challenge in college was the College of Agriculture, and that's how I went into agriculture. I graduated in 1974. The Ministry of Agriculture employed me and dispatched us to Swakoko at the government experiment station. And then they had a USAID project of 19.9 million, which would have closed if they couldn't find somebody with a bachelor's degree to join it. And that's how I got co-opted into studying soil science. So we were looking at mapping, looking at the soils of Liberia, what plants will grow, and where it was to draw a map, a national map. But we didn't have enough time to do that before things started to change in the government and in the country. But out of that, I got a scholarship to do a master's in agriculture. And so I did my master's at the University of Hawaii, where I looked at basically the tropical soils and the whole classification of soils and its potential for crop production. So I became one of the first soil scientists of Liberia, and that was my primary area of education at the master's level. So what happened was I came back after my master's. The rice riot happened. I remember growing up when my father opened a bank in Bassa in Buchanan. We lived in Upper Buchanan for a while. So we used to go there for holidays with the kids. And I think some of the kids I grew up with, somebody like Bromskin, the late Bromskin, Walker Bromskin, we learned how to ride bicycle together up in Buchanan. And then I think where else he went? He opened, everywhere they had Citibank opening, that's where he went, you know. And but most people, like you say, you didn't know my sister was Mamusu because they were in Monrovia. I was always gone. You know, I went, like I said, I spent 6.5 years in Sierra Leone until I came back to the University of Liberia in 1971. And then most of that time, since I was doing agriculture, I spent most of that time on the farm at Fendo. Came home and, you know, coming from Sierra Leone, I was very studious. So I didn't do too much around Monrovia, but hit the books until I could get it out of there. So I got a master's at University of Hawaii. And then after the coup, I was called to become the director of the Research Institute in Swakoko, which was an experiment station institute. When USAID provided funding for it, I was asked to do a PhD because the director of CARI then made the Central Agricultural Research Institute had to have a PhD. So that's how I got to come to Louisiana State University to do my PhD. And I did my PhD in agricultural extension. I did my research, in Liberia, looking at the research delivery system, which was looking at the interaction between research extension and the farmer. So I did it basically on Liberia. And it's interesting how when they're talking about extension in Liberia, most people in Liberia don't even invite me to a meeting. I just look at them and laugh because it's all in my head and you can't take it. You know, the link of my parents to Barbados, the Wiles, the Grimes, because my grandfather married to Mae Grimes and linked to the Barclays. I think you have most of that link in your data you've been collecting, because Arthur, my cousin, late Arthur, was very good at that. And we just followed since he was doing the work and I was doing growing the food and looking at how things would do on the end. The last time I went to Vonswan, which is where my great-grandmother, the mother of my grandfather, Richard Stanley, came from, um, I was trying to find land to grow cattle. And I remember the old man there saying, well, you shouldn't ask us because this is your land. And the first time they saw cattle in Cape Mount in that area was brought there by my grandfather. So I said, okay, I want to do the same thing. So they had promised me 200 acres of land to do a pasture and bring my animals because I have about 50 head of cattle on my farm in Swakopmund. And so I wanted to bring my animal production in Cape Mount and leave the other aspect of agriculture in Bonk. But anyway, as I became Director General of CARI, the Research Institute, and then the coup happened. When the coup happened, we were there for a little bit, and the war broke out in 1989, and we had to run. So I had to leave, take my family to Monrovia. It was just crazy. And you know how the war went in Liberia, people looking for people. And I finally went to Dupo Road, where me and my family lived with at the house of Momolu Salif and his wife until we left the country again through the Ivory Coast. And I came to the US to live in Louisiana. But you know, with that desire to go home, having somewhere to go to, we went back to Liberia. You know, we went back to Liberia. We worked the institute again. Well, when I got invited to Liberia, because while I was here, I became director of international programs at Southern University. I worked with Louisiana State University in the Agricultural Center. I was doing international development activities. And during that time, I worked around the world helping in agricultural development in South Africa, Zambia, Mozambique, Kenya, Tanzania, Ghana, Ethiopia, Brazil, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala. So I work all of these areas around the world that I did a lot of international development in agriculture and other aspects of it. I was director of the Democracy and Governance Project in Zambia for I think about 3 or 4 years. And then I still came back to agricultural development in China, in Taiwan, and other aspects of part of the Eastern Bloc. But it was fun. All of this thing, I know sometimes you ask, well, what was happening to your family? I didn't live out of these areas for long because my family was already here. My kids were going to school. My wife also did agriculture because at the University of Liberia, there were, I think, 2 or 3 girls in my class, and I married one out of there. Lapu Howard and I think Lockett Dumbau in our class. But she did animal breeding at Texas A&M. Sikla Elizabeth Wardlow Wiles. And she did beef cattle breeding. So actually, she was one of the first beef cattle breeders of Liberia. She became the livestock coordinator, livestock director for upper counties when we first graduated. Then after we came here, and Florence became minister, Florence asked her to help her revitalize the livestock program after the war. Florence asked her, and Linda Thomas Greenfield encouraged us to go home and help. So we say, yep, we'll come to Liberia and we'll do the best we can. CICLA went back to rebuild the livestock program as coordinator. And then the late EMMETT Dennis asked me to go to the University of Liberia as Vice President for Institutional Development, which I did. It was fun, having to give back to the country, having to help. USAID asked me to write, as part of the consultancy, the strategic plan for CARI, because as a result of the war, the Research Institute had gone down to little or nothing. Because I did that, they said they will put funding in it if I will serve as the Director General. So that took me from University of Liberia to go as Director General of CARI. In that time, my wife, CICLA Wiles, became the Assistant Minister for Administration at the Ministry of Agriculture under Flores. She became the Deputy Minister, and then finally became the Minister under Ellen Johnson Sirleaf until the elections. And you know, after the elections, everybody had to turn over to the government, and that's when we left. The government told us, indications are they didn't need us. And the people of Swakoko had given us 100 acres of land right outside of the town. And that's where we built our farm. We have, and I still left there, 6 fish ponds growing tilapia and heterotis, which is another cool water species. We had about 50 head of cattle, the West African Longhorn. We had almost 3,000 to 4,000 birds, chickens. We're producing eggs and meat. And then we also had 200 head of pigs that were producing pork. We grew rice, we grew vegetables. We had a group of clients in Monrovia that will let them know what we're producing or harvesting for the weekend. And then we will go and supply vegetables, meat or fish, whatever, to our clients in Monrovia. It became a pretty lucrative program. We worked closely with other farmers in the area. Once we had a pretty good order, we would go to Monrovia, deliver, and come back to Swakoko on Sunday or Monday. If it wasn't that big, we'll get a taxi driver to take the delivery to Monrovia and it get distributed to our clients. So agricultural production became a part of what we did. In the process, as we work with government, and my wife will complain that she didn't have enough funding to build the extension arm of the ministry to be able to take information to the farmers. Because agricultural development, if you can't get to the farmers and get the farmers' produce to the market, you're just wasting your time. Most people ask me, can we feed ourselves? Yes, I know we can do that. If we follow the proper technology and the processes that should be put in place. We can grow enough rice in Liberia to feed ourselves. We don't need to import rice. I grew 2 different varieties of rice on my farm that would come to production in 70, 75 days. Why I did not giving it to the farmers? I don't know. I was talking to someone the other day and he was telling me all the things that they're giving to the farmers, but no, give the farmers the variety that he likes. That's number 1. And the variety that you will produce within the short space of time. The country rest that we usually eat comes to maturity 120, 125 days. That's too long. But there are varieties that taste just like the country rice, look like it and everything. And our farmers can grow it. You can grow 2 crops in 1 season. So we can produce our own food. We need to do a complete study on the citrus or the fruits complete in the area, because you see how mangoes and all of these things spoil in the country. You see how potato grains spoil in the market. All we need to do is learn how to preserve it and get it to the people. You can be sitting down in Monrovia, you can't have food to eat, but you throw in potato grains away when it's spoiled in the market. When you can preserve it, cut it up, put it in the market, and people will go and get it. You know, if you provide the necessary infrastructure, it will happen. I mean, it's disappointing right now that there's no agricultural research happening, but what can I say? I decided I'm not a politician. I will stay on my farm and I will do what I do. Serene, the trip to Barbados was fantastic to know your roots, know where the people came from. We had a beautiful time because this was the Wiles family going when Arthur organized it. And if the time is conducive, I would love to go again. You know, my wife Sikla and I went, and that's the time with our cousins when we went to Barbados. You know, I don't know if this lady finished her book on the Liberians that went from Barbados. I think that book was commissioned by the Barbadian government, and I would love to get a copy of it. And I'm sure this will complement that. The documentary will complement what was done. But I'm sure we won't let all of that go down the drain. We want the Liberians to understand that we cannot hide behind this issue of country Congo. It's just a terminology, an infusion of brilliant people in the country. I think in our discussion, like I said, we need to capitalize on the fact that Liberia is a country with the door of no return and the door of return. That is one of the best we can put together for even tourism. And like I said, when I was doing international development, I was carrying people to different countries in Africa to look at, you know, Gorée Island, Cape Town, go to Benin, you know, and we went to Liberia, but it wasn't that focused. I took the conference to Liberia, but it wasn't that focused because we didn't have a full development through our tourism program for that, and it can be done. I mean, I volunteered to be part of a tourism on the tourism committee because I knew and I had done something like that. But you know, it's interesting how people are afraid of you when they think you have the knowledge of something that I share it. It's in my head. I hate to take it with me back to my maker, but I would love to share it, you know. And then I also would love to know, you know, the rest of the group that went, because when the people heard of Liberia, they were too happy and excited to go there. And that's how our parents, our great-grandparents all went to Liberia, you know. Because I don't know if you got any of that in Arthur's documentation, but there were two brothers that came from Barbados, one returned, and the other stayed. He communicated with his brother on the development that he had engaged in. Because I understood from Cape Mount that the old man Wiles had several boats that he would collect things like, especially like piassava, and take it out to the German boats at sea. So I don't know, like you say, we need to continue to dig, look at this background, because what do we tell our kids in the end? You know, yeah, I can tell them the original guys came from Barbados, and so you know, it depends on how you want to link it. They were not from South Carolina or North Carolina, but nevertheless, they just wanted to go home to contribute to the nation Liberia that we need to be proud of and ship into what it should have been or what it was. Because, you know, one of the things people tell me, oh, the children are traumatized. No, the children are not traumatized. We are the ones traumatized. because we knew Liberia through several stages. And so it traumatizes us to see Liberia now, after 170 something years, to be in this state. A nation that signed, that had signatures to the League of Nations. And what are we now? We fought for independence in Africa. And look at us. You know, it's pathetic. You know, I have few friends here from Barbados, and you know, every time we get together, they call me cousin. One of them tell me that we're all related to Padmos. I say, yeah, but you know, we are, and that's what we are right now. So we have to have that link. We had the highest rate of return in the U.S. If you even go to State Department records, they will tell you that. You know, everybody. I mean, by the time you get through with school, you're ready to go. After my master's, I spent 9 months in Northeast Texas because they wanted me to have some practical examples. I mean, practical exposure. You know, people will come here, just get degree and get on the plane and go, and then you have no idea how to apply what you learn. But I spent 9 months in Northeast Texas, mapping soils, working with Americans. You know, you couldn't pay me to stay here. You know, I came back because of conditions, because, you know, the news got out that I was killed during the war, but it didn't happen. So I came back. You know, I came back. I worked here. I worked with Americans. I worked internationally. Like I say, I've been around the world, made differences. You know, I got into Ethiopia. The tomatoes were all on the ground. So I asked the guy, I said, why are you not selling this tomato? Oh, well, the farmers sell what they can sell and then go back. I said, no. Buy from the farmers their tomato after 3 days. Take it to your canning industry. Once you do that, the farmers will grow tomato the same amount or more the next year. So until you realize that, oh, I can do this for the farmer, you know, so you spread that knowledge. I went to Guatemala. They were cutting down their coffee farm. I said, why? I said, coffee price is too low. I said, but you don't have to do that. Process your own coffee, bag it, and sell it abroad as coffee from Central America. I said, you have people from your country abroad, then they have people coming from another country who will also buy. I said, but most of all, Americans and Europeans love coffee. And so if you have that variety, the guy said, but I wasn't thinking about it. I said, I know. That's why I'm telling you now. So these are some of the things you share, you know. I mean, I work with USDA on alternative crop, medicinal crop. The hibiscus that's being used for sorrel or bisap in West Africa is extremely good for hypertension. But we started off our research looking at it as food coloring. Then we realized the potential of that particular crop for hypertension. If you drink it and keep it as a punch or drink it as a tea regularly, you might not need your high blood pressure medicine. And it's grown there. You know, in Sierra Leone, we eat it at Sawa. Even in Lufa, they eat it there, you know. So these things are all there, and we need to just start cultivating it, sharing the idea of what these things will do for us. I don't have to be sitting in somebody's office. I can consult, I can, you know, talk to people. I went to Cape Town, I was talking about doing agriculture. Oh, what position you want? What are you running for? I'm not a politician. I want to just give you information that you will need, and the politician won't be giving you 5, 6 generators, and you don't even know how to fix it. You know? So these are some of the things that we're talking about. You know, like my wife was, when we sit down and talk about her, she had links to Europe because her, you know, the guys who are coming and trading in the Grand Sino area interacted with her grandmother or her grandfather, because I think her father had brothers from England, you know. So we are all intertwined one way or the other. Because even the Wiles came from, I think, Europe somewhere to Barbados. It came from England, you know. So we can't be looking at that intermixture to be our shortcoming, because people will love to hide behind it. If you can't explain yourself, then you say, oh, I'm a country Congo. You're a countryman, what did they do for you? You're a Congo man, what did they do for you? I'm a Liberian as far as I'm concerned. In fact, I'm an African because I've gone all around. I spent a lot of time in agricultural development in Ghana, in Tanzania, in Southern Africa, you know. So for me, I don't have any regrets. My regret is that Liberia is not where she should have been by now. Give me Kisawali and rice any day. Like I said, I spent 6.5 years in Sierra Leone. So if you cook it with beans or, a little bit of peanuts and okra, I'm fine. I don't have any food allergies because as a soil scientist, I traveled the whole country. And every village I went to, I just washed my hand and ate with the people. Thank God I don't have any food allergy. I eat anything. I meet you eating, I'll eat it. If you can eat it, I can eat it. Like I say, I did projects in China and all around the world, and I didn't have any worry about food. My mother used to say, measure your behind before you swallow the bone. Don't just go and then always hang your hat where your hand can reach. So don't just go jump into anything. Yeah. I became a Boy Scout under the leadership of Gabriel Vargas Matthews. And we had so much fun with our friends and colleagues, going as Boy Scout. I was able to enter the mansion when it was first built. I was one of the first people who were in there. So those were beautiful times. I still have this friend of mine, I think he's in New York. His name is Arthur Zor. We fought all the time. And his grandmother will run after me. I'll go under the bed. But we're still friends. He opened his business in Monrovia. We got sick. We came back. He's in New York. He's planning to go back to Liberia. And I told him, I'm right behind you. I know it's not going to be an easy task. But my daughter says she can't live here. She got to go to Liberia. So we'll be on our way back. Dara's mom was May Wiles. Was May Wiles.
Yeah.
Who was the sister to, let me see. She was a sister before my father, who was Richard Wiles. Then there was Lucia Wiles, who's the mother of Nessie and Mackay Gogler. Nessie is married to Winston. And Mackay was married to Zwana Sally. And then Stanley, and he was Stanley Waldron. He was in the army, the one that was sent to the Congo and got shot in the hand. His daughter was Eileen Wiles and James, the late James Wiles. And then he has one daughter, Ella May. I think she's up in the northeast area, Rhode Island or so. Then who else? Louis Wiles, who was the father of Marina Talbot, married to Ray. I think Ray was a brewer. Louis Arthur Wiles, Rainier, and that group. I think Bill is in Florida somewhere. Then Repage Wiles, the father of Mima and Rita and Bill. Who else was there? Uncle Vani, he was a police officer and I think he died from an accident. He was one of those motorbike riders. Then I have, let me see. There's an aunt from my father's side. I think she's here. She just came back from Liberia. Then Auntie La, don't know if you remember, Auntie La had a restaurant in Vassal community. Everybody used to go there. Auntie Daba also was one of his daughters. And she passed. She got, I know two of her daughters that are here in the States somewhere. Sally Kamara and what's her name? Yata. Who else? Ooh. Marjorie and Teddy, my small aunties. Yeah, that's my grandfather's two last. Marjorie and Teddy, and then Charles. Uncle Charles is still in Monrovia. Excuse me. Yeah, Uncle Charles is still in Monrovia. Marjorie and Teddy, my two small aunties. You know, my Uncle Louis was one time the director of CARI also, or Government Farm as they used to call it. Uncle Reed Page Wiles, that's the father of Rita and Mima and Bill. And I think he has a son called Reed, who's in Ghana. Reed Wiles. Parents, grandparents would love to be remembered for their contribution, not only to their family, but to Liberians as a whole, because there were a lot of people that were not related to them, but they were under their umbrella. Grandpa used to tell Mayor Wiles and my father that they were responsible for his Vi family, because Grandpa had about 1,000 acres of land in Broadville. You know where VOA is in Monrovia? That was his property. And I think he gave the land to the Voice of America. He gave the land for and that's where the refugees from Sierra Leone stayed during their war. In fact, his mother's grave is still in Broadville. There's a place called Dicktown. And they call it Dicktown because they name it after him. It's short for Richard. Yeah. It's called Digija, and it's in that area. In fact, where Cledus Watterson is in Broadville is Wiles' land, but was sold to him by my uncle Charles. You know, so they want to, I think, want to be remembered for their contribution. Grandpa in the trading, and then becoming Speaker of the House, and May Wiles becoming the first female, like Jera and Arthur's mother, the first female minister of health and all of that. She worked also in the mansion as, I think, secretary to Topman. Like I said, my father made tremendous amount of contribution to the banking system. My mother, being that she was a nurse, she worked tremendously in addressing issues like smallpox, measles, that people were not looking at from a traditional point of view. You know, the different chalks, different leaves that she used to do that. She cured a lot of patients who had diabetic gangrene. Yeah, people who, every time she found a patient in the hospital that they were going to amputate, she would ask the doctor to please let her try what she wanted to do. And she was able to save a lot of legs. Because I remember one of her grandsons told her when she was saying, "I'm too old, I need to die, what God's keeping me here for?" And he would say to her, "No, Grandma, you remember that man who you saved his leg? His wife been praying for you, and so you're not going just now." So my mother really didn't pass until she was 91, I think, going 92. You know, so they made a lot of contribution, not only to themselves or to their family, but they made us feel like we were no different from anybody else, irrespective of where you came from. Our house was full up with everybody, you know. And so I don't care. I was born in Monrovia, but I lived in Bon County. You know, I'm not separating. I'm a Liberian. And like I say, I've been everywhere in Liberia. You know, I've mapped soils in Foya, in Grangida, Sino, you name it. Once it was agricultural development, I was in the bush. I did what it took. So I think they were happy, to be able to contribute, especially to national development. We need to get away from this issue of the separation, because everybody made a contribution. Be you from the interior. I look at some of these things where they fought, they fought wars. They wanted to be in isolation, wanted to be by themselves. And then they realized they had to come together. And so we need leaders who will say, hey, look, I'm a Liberian. Don't talk any tribe to me. If we finally decide that we're going to have a one tribe that will speak as Liberians, we need to go through that. But until then, we are Liberians. We need to come together. We need to accept the contributions of everybody, be how small it is. Yes. The diet, you got people all around want to eat potato grains. No one tribe can tell you, oh, they eat potato grain for me. Yeah, the 5 people that are Cape Man, the palm butter that they grew, or the southeastern region, the Tabagi that the northwest. But we got our dishes that everybody appreciates. And so we need to come together as that and develop what it takes. We can feed ourselves. We don't have to eat rice every day. Potato, arrow, cassava, all of these things, we can do that. It hurts to be sitting here and seeing people suffering in Monrovia when I know we can do it. And like I said, I'll go back there and they want to talk to me, I'll be willing to talk. I'm not a preacher, but I can talk.